He transmigrated into a novel, becoming the revered Saintess. Not only was she surrounded by handsome men, but she was also incredibly wealthy, rolling in money. She lived a life of extravagant luxury every single day. However, her fate was to be exposed as a fake Saintess and burned at the stake. The cause of all this began a year ago. Rumors of a true Saintess began spreading throughout the streets. Her name was Ellis. Not only was she powerful and victorious, but she was also beautiful and kind. Even the current Saintess, Elena, couldn't compare. But there could only be one true Saintess. They all suspected that the one sitting in the temple was an imposter. When the rumors reached Elena's ears, she immediately sent someone to capture her. So, Captain Carterban of the Temple Knights set out, finding Ellis in the middle of healing someone. Saintess, you must flee. The false Saintess wants to kill you. But in that moment of hesitation, the captors arrived. Could you wait a moment? I haven't finished healing. After receiving permission, she allowed everyone present to witness her powerful, victorious healing. Those who had received her grace wept, unable to bear the thought of her going to her death. She, however, possessed an unwavering confidence. It's all right. We will meet again. Bound by the Saintess's orders, the guards could only take her away. Inside the temple, Elena flew into a rage upon seeing her. How dare you impersonate the Saintess and deceive the people? You're clearly using heretical magic. Impersonating the Saintess is punishable by death. Carterban stepped forward to plead for her. If it's heretical magic, we should investigate. Under pressure from the crowd, Elena could only imprison her for the time being. Even so, the public's doubts remained. Because the victory they had witnessed with their own eyes couldn't be faked, Elena decided to go to the prison and eliminate Ellis. Unexpectedly, Captain Carterban caught her in the act. Let me go. That woman stole my sacred relic. Seeing the shocked expressions of everyone around her, she realized she had revealed her secret. She could only flee the temple in a panic. Following this, Ellis undoubtedly ascended to the position of Saintess. With her truly kind and beautiful nature, she captured the hearts of the three male leads. The fleeing false Saintess was captured and sentenced to be burned at the stake. I'm the true Saintess. Can't you hear me? You've been tricked by her, she screamed until her voice was hoarse. But no one listened. In their eyes, whoever possessed the power of victory was the true Saintess. This was her future 2 years from now. She herself was hospitalized with a serious illness, with no one by her side. Later, she became engrossed in a medical novel. The book happened to be about a young woman named Ellis. The wicked false Saintess met her end in the flames. Yet, she couldn't revel in this satisfying conclusion, because when she woke up, she had transmigrated into the body of the false Saintess. It was a beautiful body, a healthy body she wouldn't have dared to dream of in the past. The previous Elena's nightly companions didn't matter. As long as there were enough gold coins and jewels, there would always be someone to accompany her. However, after the true Saintess appeared, no one remained by her side. Sitting on the sofa, she reflected. The original owner's personality was indeed terrible, but she couldn't simply accept her fate. If she could improve her relationships with the male leads, perhaps she could survive. She had transmigrated into the novel as the false Saintess. To escape the fate of being barbecued, she wanted to salvage her reputation. Initially, she planned to escape from the temple. However, having grown up in the temple since childhood, she had no knowledge of the outside world. Escaping was no different from seeking death. To change her future, she chose to start with her interpersonal relationships, especially with the 4 main characters of the novel. Whenever the heroine appeared, she would enthusiastically welcome her. Clinging to their influence seemed like a good idea, but she remembered that just a few days after transmigrating, the original owner had a falling out with Captain Carterban. He had led his troops to battle against magical beasts, returning with his dying lieutenant to seek healing from the Saintess. But the Saintess refused to see them, simply because before his birth, the Saintess had wanted him to stay and protect her. Saintess, the target of this expedition, was a large magical beast. If we hadn't gone, the irritable Saintess, her command defied, was furious. Fine, go wash your face with red wine then. The false Saintess, Elena, smiled as she sent the knight away, thinking that sooner or later she would make her pay, and that price would come quickly. She refused to heal the knight, unless Captain Carterban crawled to her bedside, and when he did crawl, she mocked him. How worthy of the captain of the Temple Knights to kneel before me for a mere subordinate. You crawled here like a dog. How dare I ignore your sincerity? Later, though the deputy captain lived, he could never draw a bow again. He could only leave the knights and return home to farm. Alina, the false saintess, felt a pang of despair at the thought. In the novel, Carter Band pursued noble reputation his entire life. He was a role model for all knights. How could she mend their relationship after such an insult? While the saintess was still immersed in sorrow, someone came to disturb her. It was High Priest Carlos. However, the false saintess only remembered him as a high-ranking priest. To avoid revealing that the saintess had been replaced, she decided to meet him. "Greetings, Saintess." He leaned back on the sofa, trying his best to appear arrogant. "What is it?" "I clearly said I needed to rest. I know the soul transfer must have been uncomfortable. However, we need your decision regarding the priest in charge of the prayer meeting." She then remembered. This was the largest annual event of the temple. It was the only day ordinary people could see the saintess in person. But the original saintess hadn't participated in this event. What exactly did she need to decide? She truly had no idea. Tossing her head, she decided to bluff. "I don't recall you asking me for anything." Seeing no one around, the priest leaned in and whispered, "I asked if, since High Priest Whelan is indisposed, I could be in charge of the prayer meeting." Judging by his face, Alina felt he was not a good person. "I'm not sure about that yet. So, please leave for now." The priest became anxious. "Are you breaking our agreement because you weren't satisfied with the men I sent you? I carefully selected them. 2 weren't enough? I can." Alina finally understood what kind of priest he was. "I don't need any men. Don't send any more. Get out, now." Alina was exhausted. To prevent her situation from worsening, she decided to properly prepare for the prayer meeting. She had transmigrated into the novel as the false saintess destined for the stake. To change her fate, she planned to actively prepare for the upcoming prayer meeting. Thus, the real-life slacker needed to start learning from scratch. The preparations for the ceremonial robes were also extensive. Servants nervously inquired about the route for the prayer meeting, asking if it needed to be inspected. It was then on the terrace that she saw one of the male leads for the first time, Captain Carter Band. The servants panicked, fearing the saintess would become angry at seeing someone who upset her. In truth, the saintess was also afraid. He had charged at her with a drawn sword. Now, even more worried about the final execution, she resolved that if she didn't want to die, the prayer meeting had to be a success. At the end of the day, she collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. It had been a long time since she had walked so much or had the opportunity to feel this tired. She even found a certain enjoyment in this state. She no longer wanted to return to her original world. She stood up again, wanted to walk some more, but worried about troubling the priests outside. It was then she remembered the secret door behind the mirror that led to the backyard. This door was opened by pulling on the victory emblem. The unfamiliar, yet beautiful scenery of the backyard was captivating. However, she had walked so much that her legs could barely support her. While resting, she noticed 3 moles on her leg. They seemed to be intentionally placed marks. She had no memory of them and hadn't read about them in the novel either. Just then, a strange man appeared before her. He had been secretly sent by Priest Carlos to serve the Saintess. He immediately began to make unwanted advances. This new Saintess, however, didn't tolerate such behavior. She turned to leave. The man persisted. "I heard you change your mind often. Please, just give me one chance. I'm sure I can satisfy you. Please, Saintess, grant me this favor." He struggled, but the man mistook it for playful resistance. "So you like it rough, huh? Fight back harder then," he roared. Alina's eyes welled with unshed tears. "Get off," she choked out. Carter Band descended like a hawk, tossing the man aside like a rag doll. The oppressive aura radiating from Carter Band terrified the man even more. He was certain he'd be pulverized with a single punch. "I suggest you make yourself scarce," Carter Band said coldly. He was merely doing his duty. He felt no sympathy for the disheveled Saintess. "Thank you for helping me," Alina said, bowing her head. She accepted Carter Band's disdain as a consequence of her past actions. "I'm grateful you don't blame me for interrupting you. Punishing me for my victory would have been easy enough." With that, she hoisted the unconscious man over her shoulder and left. "Isn't he an outsider? How'd he get into the temple?" The knights, taking in the man's handsome features, assumed he was one of the Saintess's lovers. Tie him up. We'll send him out in the morning when he sobers up. The other knights were dissatisfied with the decision to release the man without questioning. One wanted to interrogate him and keep a record, exposing the Saintess's true nature to the public. Watch your tongue. You swore an oath of loyalty before joining the Temple Knights, Carterban warned, returning to his quarters, his mind troubled. Could this pathetic, vulnerable woman truly be the same Saintess from before? He had transmigrated into the novel as the false Saintess, destined for the stake. To change her fate, Elena was diligently preparing for the upcoming prayer meeting. She was forced to memorize mountains of material, a duty the original Elena had shunned after growing up. Elena's childhood memories, however, painted a picture of a diligent and studious child. Just then, High Priest Carlos barged in again. Elena decided to let him in and settle things once and for all. He was furious upon hearing someone else had been appointed to oversee the prayer meeting. Have you disregarded my unwavering loyalty? To discourage him, Elena asked him to recite the prayer verses. Ultimately, using his inability to recite the verses as justification, she dismissed him. Although you won't be in charge of the prayer meeting, I will reward you so you don't feel too disappointed. Carlos scoffed at the idea of any other reward. He overturned a table in a fit of rage and stormed out, vowing revenge. Left alone, Elena began organizing the scattered materials. She stumbled upon the security plans for the prayer meeting. Carterban had always been the Saintess's personal guard. The thought of spending a whole day under his watchful eye was unsettling. She was surprised to see the deputy captain assigned to protect the Saintess this time. Considering Carterban's open dislike for the Saintess, the arrangement wasn't entirely surprising. The day of the prayer meeting arrived. Elena was utterly exhausted. In this world, gods truly existed. When demonic beasts appeared, the Saintess's divine power could repel them. People had absolute faith in Elena's divine abilities. Many traveled long distances just to see her. Elena had just finished dressing when a maid rushed in, panicked. Everyone's gossiping. Saintess, they say you spend every night with multiple men, wasting resources and neglecting your duties. They say you're incurring the wrath of the gods. These rumors were true. The previous Saintess had behaved exactly that way. This year, Captain Carterban, no longer concerned for the Saintess's safety, intended to cancel the final event of the prayer meeting, the Saintess's blessing. Despite everything proceeding as planned, Elena was determined to fight. She wouldn't let her efforts be in vain. Carterban was already waiting outside. I'll accompany you. I'm here to fulfill my duty. Thank you, Elena replied. His actions were perfectly in line with his dutiful nature. As the Saintess entered, the crowd erupted in cheers. Witnessing the magnificent prayer ceremony, Elena couldn't understand how the original Saintess could have dismissed the love and expectations of so many people as worthless. After all, she had always strived to live up to everyone's expectations, desperate not to be disliked. As the ceremony neared its final stage, the head priest had instructed her to simply pass by the people as she had done the previous year. There was no need to bless each individual. But looking at these wretched souls, Elena's compassion surged. Victory could heal external wounds and neutralize poisons, but it couldn't cure their illnesses. She wanted to offer them comfort, but then the unexpected happened. Commotion erupted from the crowd. An elderly man pushed his way to the front. Having transmigrated into the body of the false Saintess in this novel, Elena was determined to avoid being burned at the stake. She planned to start by fulfilling her duties and redeeming herself. Yet, on the very first day of the prayer meeting, someone threw a rotten egg at her. Chaos descended. "You filthy whore!" a voice shrieked. Rolling around with men in the temple every night, the atmosphere instantly turned hostile. Those who had been skeptical now believed the rumors. Captain Carterban urged Elena to return to the safety of the temple. Deciding to ignore the hecklers, Elena approached the elderly man who had emerged from the throng. "Do you still wish for my blessing?" she asked. If nothing she did could change the course of the novel, she would at least do what she wanted. The old man nodded and removed his headscarf, revealing a disfigured face. Unfazed, Elena offered her blessing. Only when he thanked her did she realize he wasn't old at all. He grasped her hand and kissed it. "Saintess," he murmured, "I've been waiting for the day we would meet again." After imprisoning those responsible for the disturbance, Captain Carterban came to apologize to Elena. He blamed himself for failing to protect her and requested punishment. Elena, still relying on him for her escape plan, couldn't possibly punish him. She simply dismissed him. Later that evening, seeking solace in the garden air, Elena overheard some knights gossiping. No matter how hard she tries these past few days, it doesn't change what she's done, one said. The scandal is spreading across the continent. It's a disgrace to the temple. Reclining in her chair, Elena fumed. It was utterly ridiculous. The original Elena had showered those men with gifts. She was the one who should be considered the client, not the whore. And the disguised man from earlier that day remained a complete mystery. Lost in thought, she drifted off to sleep. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her bedroom. "Saintess," a voice said. "You're awake." The attendant scrambled to his feet. "There's another prayer meeting today. We mustn't be late. Although, you only need to attend the afternoon ceremony. Did you sleep well? You look much better today." "Who brought me back to my room last night?" she asked. The attendant panicked. "You went out last night?" he stammered, suspecting another clandestine rendezvous. "No, I think I was dreaming," Elena said. Since they were unaware, she must have returned through the secret passage, then been so exhausted she'd forgotten. "Saintess," the attendant said, "would you please inspect the tributes before the ceremony begins? And immediately afterward, you're scheduled to meet with the delegations from the various nations. The Saintess's power is what protects us from demonic magic. The closer a nation is to the Grand Temple, the safer they are. For the more distant nations, the temple dispatches knights and high priests to watch over the people. Therefore, each nation presents tributes of gratitude during the prayer meeting. These tributes are twofold: essential goods like grain and herb for those attending the prayer meeting, and offerings specifically for the Saintess." Elena gazed at the dazzling array of jewels. These are the things the original Saintess craved. Previously, the impoverished nation of Lulus had offered textiles, but the Saintess had burned them, and in their fury, Lulus had refused to send any more knights. This time, Lulus had sent a massive gemstone as a plea for help. "Return these tributes," Elena commanded. The attendant, assuming she was still angry and intended to reject Lulus again, grew anxious. But Elena agreed to dispatch the knights to Lulus, even promising to increase their number. Meanwhile, the Ephirius Empire had sent not only jewels, but also essential supplies the Grand Temple desperately needed. This deviated from the original story. The Saintess had been furious that the Empire hadn't sent jewels. Currently, the Empire and the Grand Temple were at odds. The Empire, having annexed territories surrounding the Grand Temple through conquest, had long been a thorn in the Temple's side. The Empire's prince was also the second male lead in the novel. "I'll look at the rest myself," Elena thought, a headache beginning to form. Why would the original Saintess have demanded these jewels? She only used them as mere decorations, showing no real interest in them. She truly had a knack for doing things that irritated others. Elena planned to return the jewels. While verifying a personal letter, she discovered a strange envelope. It bore no signature. The contents simply stated, "Transaction complete. I will come to find you soon." She had transmigrated into the body of the false Saintess in this novel. To escape her fiery fate, she intended to start by becoming a diligent and responsible Saintess. She'd only meant to read through the letters for various countries. But then she found this anonymous letter, and the more she read, the more unsettling it became. If it weren't for the small cut on her hand, accidentally inflicted by herself, she would have thought she was hallucinating. In this world, where magic was considered a dark power, she suspected the letter was from the third male lead, the Mage King of the Northern Continent. In the original story, he only began to act after meeting Ylles. After reviewing the tributes, she left the offerings displayed. Encountering Captain Carterban, she immediately noticed his cloak. She guessed it was because he had shielded her from the thrown rotten eggs. "I apologize, Captain Carterban. I didn't expect to soil your cloak." "You needn't worry about it," he replied stiffly. In truth, his cloak had been soiled the previous night by the Saintess herself. He had seen the Saintess in the garden and suspected she was meeting someone secretly. He had intended to leave her, but she grabbed his cloak. And then someone else came to the garden looking for something. To avoid being seen, he had no choice but to escort the Saintess back to her bedroom. The honeyed words were meant only for the Knight Commander and the Saintess, but the Saintess believed only she knew. Knights rarely used their privileges. Carterban had already broken countless rules. Not only had he touched the Saintess, but he had also secretly entered her bedroom. But rest assured, the blessing time has passed. You won't be pelted with eggs anymore. This reminded Carterban of his failure to protect her, and his face darkened. Unable to bear the oppressive atmosphere any longer, Elena asked the captain to wait while she fetched tea. It was a tea personally chosen by the original Saintess. Unexpectedly, after a single sip, Elena collapsed. In her dream, she saw the original Saintess. "I'm so sorry," she rushed to apologize. "I didn't mean to enter your body. You might not believe me." But the Saintess simply pinched her chin, chuckling. "I brought you here." Elena was surprised. "Why me? I deliberately chose the worst child." "Are you joking? Why are you living like this?" She was trying her best to survive, unsure why the Saintess was so angry. "You should be living recklessly and carelessly." Elena felt like she had a million questions. She couldn't understand why the Saintess would choose a life where everyone hated her. So what? Even if they're dissatisfied, this body is still the Saintess. No one can pull me down from the altar. That's what being the Saintess means. The Saintess didn't yet know her fate to be burned at the stake. Elena didn't want to upset her further, but she foolishly asked, "Why did you spare Carterban at the prayer meeting? He committed the crime of failing to protect the Saintess. He should have been beheaded. Why do you hate Carterban? What did he do wrong?" The provoked Saintess grew even angrier, threatening to replace her with a soul filled with desire. Elena had been bedridden for years. Then, she transmigrated into the body of the debauched and tyrannical false Saintess in this book. When she finally regained a healthy body, she only wanted to experience the joys of overtime and diligently restore the false Saintess's reputation, ascending to a life of universal admiration. But her maid simply made her a cup of tea. After drinking it, she felt unconscious for 3 days, shattering the good impression she had painstakingly built with the public. They suspected the Saintess was feigning illness to avoid the prayer meeting. It was a false accusation, but it was just like the original plot. During those 3 days of unconsciousness, she met the real Saintess. Unexpectedly, it was the real Saintess who had brought her here, threatening to replace him with a more obedient worker if he didn't comply with his demands. To avoid losing this hard-won body, he had no choice but to negotiate with the false Saintess. "As long as it doesn't involve murder or arson, I'll do anything you ask." A Saintess cannot kill, whether it's herself or others. Absolutely not by her own hand. Besides, killing is boring. "I want you to do something interesting for me. I want you to sleep with a man. You have 1 week. If you can't do it, you can pack your bags and leave." He opened his eyes again, only to learn that he had 4 days left to fulfill this bizarre request. Still confined to his bed due to his weakened state, he ate his meal there, more determined than ever not to return to his previous life. The exhaustion he felt after a day of walking and working on his own 2 feet felt like a blessing. After his meal, Carterban came to report. They still hadn't found the cause of Elena's collapse. The tea, which Elena herself had chosen, had been investigated and cleared of suspicion. "We also have a witness regarding the disturbance High Priest Carlos caused a few days ago. However, the delegations, believing the Saintess didn't want to see them, have all returned home." Suddenly finding herself with nothing to do, Elena felt a pang of melancholy. "The Ephirius Empire's delegation remained behind, wishing to see you. Would you like to meet with them?" Prince Leon hadn't initially wanted to attend the gathering. However, his father, the Emperor, wished him to visit the Grand Temple and investigate the relationship between the Saintess and the Knight Commander. Their informants had been diligently working to sow discord between the two, and their relationship had initially deteriorated significantly. However, their recent interactions had taken a subtle turn, causing the Emperor some unease. Thus, the initially disinterested crown prince found himself intrigued, wanting to see the situation for himself. After all, the continent's strongest knight, as rumor had it, was worth meeting. If the rumors proved true, he intended to bring Carterban into his fold. Upon returning home, he immediately instructed his subordinates to prepare a disguise. His subordinate quipped, "Indeed, if you went as yourself, there'd be no need for a ceremony. The other delegations will be sharpening their knives for you. Since you're meeting the Saintess, and you've grown tired of the Empire's ladies, I hear the Saintess is quite beautiful too. Am I the kind of man who cares only for appearances? You prefer dangerous, intriguing beauties." The Saintess, with her rumored promiscuity, wasn't his type. Leon was preparing his disguise when he received intelligence that Carterban would no longer be serving as the Saintess's guard. The rift between them was widening faster than anticipated. This was precisely the outcome he desired. With a little more provocation, they would surely part ways completely. He planned to seduce the Saintess. But first, he would disguise himself and assess her appearance, determining if she was worth the effort. At the prayer meeting, he saw the Saintess and Carterban holding hands, arousing suspicions of an illicit relationship. He was about to abandon his pursuit of the Saintess when he received her blessing. This sparked his curiosity and made him reconsider. He had been bedridden for years, and then suddenly, he found himself transported into the body of the novel's debauched, false Saintess. He had intended to focus on his duties and change the original Saintess's fate, only to be felled by a cup of tea. 3 days later, he awoke to find that only the Furious delegation remained. The others had departed. He decided to meet with the remaining delegation. Please bring in the Furious Empire's delegation. He had barely finished speaking when Leon, practically scrambling, knelt before the Saintess, kissing her hand and introducing himself. He moved so quickly that even Carterban was caught off guard. Hearing his voice and seeing his eyes, Alina immediately recognized him as the elderly man from the prayer meeting. His actions stunned everyone present. No one expected the prince of the hostile, Furious Empire to remain. Alina observed the seemingly boisterous but inwardly enigmatic warmonger. Had she known it was the crown prince who had stayed behind, she wouldn't have agreed to the meeting. Haha, it seems I made the right decision coming to the temple. Why didn't I come to see the Saintess sooner? Alina forced a smile, exchanging pleasantries. Listening to his blatant lies irritated her. I'm usually quite busy with imperial affairs, but thankfully I finished my schedule early and hurried to join the delegation. He knew that even though she knew he was lying, she couldn't do anything about it. I sent various jewels and ornaments to the temple. Why aren't you wearing any, Saintess? Do you dislike them? It was the high priests, unable to bear the crown prince's scornful mockery of the Saintess, who reprimanded him, snapping, "You dare show such disrespect." If it were the real Saintess, she would have thrown whatever was at hand in his face and then declared war. But Alina chose to return the jewelry and ornaments untouched, keeping only the grain that would be useful to the people. The crown prince, Leon, was somewhat taken aback as the previously prepared jewels were brought before him. Well then, he said, it seems we have nothing more to discuss. Alina rose to leave. Carterban intercepted the crown prince as he started after her, his gaze a clear warning against any rash actions. Your Highness, he addressed Leon, Saintess Alina has other engagements. You must prepare for your next appointment. Saintess, Carterban continued smoothly. As you can see, His Highness and I still have matters to discuss. I'll take my leave now. I wish you a safe journey home, Your Highness. Leon suddenly found the woman intriguing and beautiful, perfectly fitting his taste. Not so fast, Saintess Alina, he declared. I intend to stay at the Grand Temple for a while. I've been burdened by the weight of my actions on behalf of the Empire, he continued, feigning remorse. I wish to remain here and repent. I hope that the Saintess's grace will cleanse my soul. So, he added, his eyes fixed on Alina, if you could spare some time for me in the future, I would be eternally grateful. Alina left the meeting room with a heavy heart. She didn't forget to thank Carterban, knowing he likely had no other business and had fabricated the excuse to help her escape the crown prince. She felt a pang of guilt, knowing he was a man of integrity and likely uncomfortable with the lie. Though, perhaps he was simply fulfilling his duty to prevent excessive contact between the Saintess and Leon. Saintess Alina, Carterban said, his voice low. Crown Prince Leon gives off an unsettling aura. It would be best to keep your distance. Alina offered a small smile, surprised by Carterban's direct and unexpectedly kind advice. I'm so glad I met you. Carterban, she thought, her inner turmoil hidden behind a polite facade. Thank you for your concern. If her relationship with Carterban improved, perhaps there was hope for changing her fate. Back in her room, while Sission prepared a bath for her, Alina chose to continue working, a silent protest against her predicament. Only 4 days left, she thought grimly. And I've never even held a man's hand. Where am I supposed to find someone to? She couldn't even finish the thought. Work was the only way to numb the panic. But when she saw the name Carl on a document, her blood ran cold. She trembled uncontrollably. It was the original Saintess's fear surfacing. Alina, who had lived for many years before finding herself in this doomed body, had hoped to change her fate through hard work. But she hadn't expected the original Saintess to be the one who pulled her here. And to keep this body she had to with a man within a week. The memory of a name that had caused the original Saintess such distress flashed through her mind again, the name she'd seen while working late last night. Tentatively, she asked Sisson, "I saw Priest Carl's name on the list of candidates for High Priest yesterday. I'd love to see him, but I heard he's been stationed at the border for a long time." She suspected the original Saintess had banished almost all the competent priests to the border, and Carl was likely one of them. "Do you think it would be wise to consider Priest Carl for the position of High Priest?" she continued. "He's young, but he's an exemplary individual. And the Saintess listened to him, didn't she?" Elena pressed gently. "Even if he volunteered for the border post, wouldn't it be better to invite him back?" Just hearing the name made her body tremble. She dismissed Sisson and threw herself into her work. Keeping busy was the only way to avoid her spiraling thoughts. She noticed the gift left by the Ephirius Empire on her desk. Curiosity piqued. She opened it. The room erupted in a shower of flower petals. Inside, she found a letter detailing the Crown Prince's daily life. It ended with a rather amusing joke. Elena shook her head, trying to resist his charm. "I need to be careful around this man," she thought. "He's notoriously popular with women." A wild thought crossed her mind. Should I just with him? But she quickly dismissed the idea. This man was beyond her control. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince waited impatiently in his quarters for a reply. He asked his subordinates 300 times a day if a response had arrived. He even received an assassin before he received a reply. He decided to take the initiative. Conquering the Grand Temple through force would be met with fierce resistance. If he could diminish the Saintess's authority and win over the Knight Commander, everything would be much simpler. He was also thankful that the Saintess was so flawed. The commoners would be in a panic because of the rumors. Of course, the easiest thing would be to follow his father's example. Conquer other nations through marriage. He just didn't know if the Saintess could marry. He saw Carterban, who was still on duty. He enthusiastically went up to greet him, but was met with a cold face. In the blink of an eye, the deadline had arrived. For the sake of the Saintess's body, he was carried from his workstation back to the bedroom. He, who was about to face his second death, was restlessly fidgeting with anxiety. He should have told the Saintess. He would ultimately be burned to death, and no one would be on his side. Unable to bear it any longer, he flung the door open and ran frantically down the hallway, terrified. He cried out, "Elena, if you have no attachment to life, can't you give it to me? I want to live." Finally, he remembered the Saintess's condition. If he fulfilled it, he could live. At that moment, an angel descended from heaven. "I'm in bed." He, after many years, transmigrated into the body of the false Saintess who was about to be burned to ashes. He had intended to work hard and change his fate, but he hadn't expected that the original Saintess herself had pulled him here. And to continue possessing this body, he had to sleep with a man within a week. And tonight was the deadline. He fled the bedroom in a panic. In the hallway, he encountered a sweet young man. Seeing the weeping Saintess, he offered his comfort. Elena abruptly grabbed his hand. She pulled him into a random bedroom, intent on claiming him. Prince Leon, whom Carterban's men had been diligently guarding against, was thus abducted by the Saintess. After giving instructions to the guards, Carterban unknowingly arrived at the Saintess's residence. The servants frantically found Carterban, reporting the Saintess's disappearance. Because tonight, like before, she had frighteningly yelled at them, they hadn't dared to follow her. Carterban anxiously searched everywhere for the Saintess. At this moment, the Saintess was playing hardball with the Crown Prince. "Sleep with me." The prince was stunned by the question. Thinking he disagreed, she turned to leave without hesitation. "If I refuse, will you go find someone else?" He certainly couldn't let such a good opportunity slip away. He stole Elena's first kiss. He picked her up to do the unspeakable. After this and that, the midnight bells chimed, awakening Elena. Tears of relief streamed down her face. She had survived. She pushed away the Crown Prince, who still wanted to linger, without a second thought. After politely bowing in thanks, she ran out without looking back. Carterban caught her just as she nearly stumbled. Seeing the love bites on her, his eyebrows furrowed into a knot. He suspected the prince, who had followed them out, had forced himself on the Saintess. He drew his sword, ready to deal with the scoundrel. The prince, having rushed out in such haste, had even forgotten his accessories. He suspected it was a trap. Fortunately, the Saintess stopped Carterban, explaining it was a misunderstanding. But the liquid dripping on the ground. Expose or lie. Carterban picked up the Saintess and looked coldly at the prince. I won't let you get away with this. The bewildered prince returned to his quarters, feeling used and discarded. He craved the sacred relic even more. Alina, taken in by Carterban, met the original Saintess again in a dream. So happy are you? You spineless waste. It seems you'll do anything to survive. Emboldened by his survival, he retorted, according to our agreement, this body is mine. What are you going to do with this body now? Aren't you past the 10-year crisis? You're not going to do something useless again, are you? I'm going to be a good Saintess. I'm going to be liked by everyone. But there's something I'm curious about. Who is Carl? The original Saintess exploded at the name. How do you know that name? Everyone said you listened to him. Was he another one of your little lovers? The furious original Saintess, Elise, gripped Alina's throat, then hesitated, her rage momentarily checked. No need for me to do it myself. You received the letter, didn't you? The letter detailing what happens next month? It will be more torturous than death itself. Because you're going to carry that beast child. He possessed the false Saintess's body, slept with the imperial prince, and now refuses to take responsibility. Palion led his troops to attack the Grand Temple, and I only deigned to meet him then. However, the prince isn't the pushy type. He wasn't even angry at being treated so casually. Instead, he told the Saintess to come back for more if she ever needed to. Before Leon left, he even bragged to Carterban about it. Carterban was so furious he didn't show his face in front of the Saintess for days. Whereas Knight Commander Carterban, Alina kept asking the knights, hoping to find Carterban and explain. Though there wasn't really anything to explain. Unexpectedly, her concern for the Knight Commander was misinterpreted by his subordinates. Doesn't she have enough with the commander? Now she wants his body too, one whispered. What do you want with him? Another knight snapped, quickly clamping a hand over his comrade's mouth and apologizing profusely. With so many people watching, Alina couldn't simply let it go. She ordered the offending knight to remove his armor and confine himself to quarters. Although Alina didn't inflict any physical punishment, the other knight gave him a thorough beating. You can hate the Saintess, but you can't openly defy her. If you want to die, don't drag me down with you. Get out of the Knight Order. Alina received a request from the priests to visit High Priest Delaran. He was old and frail, and they feared he wouldn't see the next sunrise. They had hesitated, worried she would refuse, but Alina, now inhabiting Elise's body, had a different concern. Would the high priest realize she wasn't the true Saintess? I'll go, she said. Although she couldn't find any memories of High Priest Delaran in the original Saintess's memories, she still wanted to visit the dying man. She arrived at Delaran's bedside. He was barely breathing. I need to be alone with him, she told the others, and they filed out. She tried to channel divine power into him. It wouldn't save him, but it might give him the strength to speak. When he opened his eyes, his first words shocked her. You're not the true Saintess, are you? Alina froze, a cold sweat breaking out. Had the old man seen through her disguise? Why, you're joking, right? Since you haven't denied it, how am I still alive? Could you help me sit up? Alina was curious. The original Saintess had been close to him in her childhood. What had happened to drive them apart? He asked Alina if she had chosen the next high priest. The Saintess couldn't be left without counsel. When he learned that many were recommending Priest Carl, the old man became agitated. He revealed something Alina hadn't known. You and Priest Carl have reconciled? You're thinking clearly now. I could die in peace. I truly hope the two of you can return to how you once were. Just hearing Carl's name made Alina tremble. Delaran passed away shortly after. At his funeral, the priests, barely able to contain their grief, nearly came to blows over who would be the next high priest. However, when Carl's name was mentioned, everyone fell silent. No one objected. Alina's curiosity about Carl's apparent charisma intensified. Let him know. Summon him to the Grand Temple. While everyone was gathered at the funeral, the knight who had been confined to quarters secretly sought out Prince Leon. To clear Carterban's name, he had to do something. He had possessed the false Saintess's body, hoping to focus on his mission. But the Saintess threatened him with losing control of her body if he didn't find a man. After a one-night stand with Prince Leon, he woke up in Carterban's bed. He had simply asked Carterban to make him some tea, and then he'd fallen asleep. He tried to sneak back to his own room, but when he opened the door, he found Carterban standing guard outside. Carterban rubbed his tired eyes. His first priority was to return Alina to her own body. I've silenced the guards at the door. You needn't worry anymore. Alina crouched by the door, her head pounding. Her relationship with Carterban had just begun to improve, and now it was about to crumble again. I need to hide these clothes, she thought. I'll have to find a chance to return them to him secretly. If anyone finds out, the rumors will start flying again. Having changed her clothes, Alina prepared to face the day while also planning an escape route, just in case Elise reappeared and she was sent to the stake again. She didn't dare ask the priests about the situation outside, fearing suspicion. If only I could use divine power properly, things would be easier. A young priest hurried in, clutching urgent documents that required her signature. He tripped and splattered the documents with something resembling tomato sauce. His heart sank. He had ruined such important documents. Would he be dragged away and dismembered? Alina, however, was more concerned about his well-being than the damaged papers. Anxious, Alina desperately wished she could control the divine power to heal him. Miraculously, it seemed the gods had answered her prayer. The priests, witnessing the Saintess wield divine power after so long, were moved to tears. It seemed she had been capable of using it before Elise appeared. This newfound ability gave her another chance to escape. Her relief was short-lived. A more troubling matter arose. Crown Prince Leon was outside, refusing to leave until he saw her. He seemed prepared to camp at her door all day. Forced into a corner, Alina realized the confrontation was unavoidable. She feared he might, in his fury, order an attack on the temple. Leon and Carterban were locked in a tense standoff, glaring at each other. Ensuring the Saintess's safety is my duty, Carterban stated firmly. Leon retorted with a brazen smirk. I, too, understand that my beauty can be dangerous. Alina stepped between the two men, who looked ready to come to blows. She invited Leon inside for a private conversation. He followed, humming a tune and casting a smug glance at Carterban. As they disappeared inside, Carterban ground his teeth in frustration. She's going to use last night's incident to blow this whole thing out of proportion, he muttered. Inside, Alina swallowed nervously, trying to find the right words to avoid a diplomatic crisis. Last night was a mistake, she began. Surely, your highness is magnanimous enough to forgive a momentary lapse in judgment. I assure you, it won't happen again. But for you, Leon said, his smile vanishing. Last night was probably just another Tuesday, wasn't it? His words implied even the Saintess considered herself frivolous. His chilling expression startled Alina. She had provoked someone she couldn't afford to offend. If you ever find yourself in need of company again, Leon continued, his voice low, do come find me. I'd like to get to know you better. Outside, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Carterban's face was a thundercloud, his gaze fixed on the closed door as if he could see through it. Emerging from the room, Leon couldn't resist a final jab at Carterban. Sorry to keep you waiting, he said with a sneer. Next time, try to be a little more discreet. I find your constant presence distracting. While the Saintess presided over the late high priest's funeral, other priests slipped away to meet with the imperial prince. Priest Lades, Leon greeted, a false smile plastered on his face. Thank you for taking the time to see me. He gestured to the prepared refreshments, maintaining a veneer of politeness as he welcomed yet another priest. Lades felt a knot of apprehension in his stomach. What could the crown prince possibly want to discuss with him? After a flurry of compliments, Leon finally revealed his purpose. You aided the injured imperial knights some time ago, he began. I've come to express my gratitude. A kindness should be repaid tenfold. Thanks to you, our knights returned home safely. Lades was clearly taken in by the prince's charm and apparent humility. Lades stared at the proffered gift box, speechless with anticipation. He wondered what treasures the prince might bestow upon him. When he opened the box to reveal a large, uncut stone, he almost suspected Leon was mocking him. This is a memento brought back from the expedition healed by the high priest, Leon explained. Though humble in appearance, I hope you'll accept it. Lades eyed the dazzling diamond with undisguised greed, but hesitated. Such a lavish gift for simply healing a few soldiers seemed suspicious. Priest Lades, Leon continued, his voice smooth as silk, I hope that when you become high priest, you'll remember my gratitude. The title, High Priest, resonated deeply with Lades. It seemed he had the imperial prince's support. In truth, Lades wasn't the only priest Leon had approached. He was just one pawn in the prince's game. This was all part of Leon's plan to gain leverage over Alina. Exhausted after a long day, Leon received a letter from his father. He didn't need to open it to know it was a summons to return home. He unfolded the letter. It contained a single, pointed question. Are you planning to marry? As he suspected, his every move was being scrutinized by the emperor. Meanwhile, Elena, finally free after a day of tedious meetings, felt utterly drained. She longed to dismantle the power-hungry individuals vying for control. Perhaps when Priest Carl returned, the original Saintess would be too afraid to cause any more trouble. Suddenly, the mark on her thigh flared with pain. She wondered if the strange symbol could be healed with divine power. Elena attempted to channel the divine power, but the mark seemed to absorb it completely. The Saintess, having just seen High Priest Delarin, now faced a new mystery. Watching the raging fire, Elena remembered the false Saintess's fate. Determined to avoid being reduced to ashes, she turned her gaze towards Carterban. Her top priority now was to mend her relationship with Carterban. Even though he had been avoiding her, she knew he would be present at this ceremony. Elena scanned the crowd, finally locating Carterban. He, however, quickly turned his head away, avoiding her gaze. Realizing she was being shunned, Elena decided to use the pretense of returning his clothes as an opportunity to explain herself. As evening fell, cloaked in mourning attire and the cover of darkness, she made her way to Carterban's quarters. She only had to cross the courtyard to reach his residence. It wasn't far, but she still encountered others. Her heart pounded in her chest, but thankfully, they didn't recognize the Saintess beneath the dark robe and simply greeted her before moving on. Just as Carterban's quarters came into view, she was discovered. It was the knight who always held such disdain for the Saintess, a devoted follower of Carterban. He wouldn't allow anyone to approach his commander's residence without proper cause. He abruptly ripped away the veil of the furtive figure. Discovering the sneaking figure to be the Saintess, he wore an "I knew it" expression. This woman, carrying a change of clothes, was trying to seduce the commander in the middle of the night. Angrily trampling on Carterban's clothes, he viciously grabbed Elena by the collar. "A foolish and wanton Saintess like you. I've seen right through you." Even though she maintained a perfect facade in front of others, her throat constricted, Elena struggled against his grip. Acting on instinct, she unleashed a protective barrier in self-defense. The knight was thrown against a tree, unconscious. Elena, who had been avoiding people until now, began to tremble as she called for help, worried that the young knight might have died. Just then, Carterban arrived. He had transmigrated into the body of the false Saintess in this book. To avoid the original Saintess's fate of being burned at the stake, he needed to change the story. First, he had to win over Carterban, the commander of the Knights. However, ever since he saw the Saintess running from another man's room, Carterban had been deliberately avoiding her. Elena had intended to take advantage of the dark and empty streets to return his clothes and explain the situation. But Carterban's subordinate assumed the Saintess was trying to seduce his beloved commander. Coupled with his pre-existing prejudice against the Saintess, he attacked her. By the time Carterban arrived, it was too late. Safe now, Elena sat on Carterban's bed, trembling, convinced she had killed a man. Even Carterban's attempts to comfort her couldn't ease her anxiety. Is he all right? Is he still alive? Doesn't the Saintess remember? Your divine power cannot kill. He only has a mild concussion. Relief washed over Elena. Carterban knelt, apologizing. Subordinates who committed such offenses were expelled from the Knights. He knew attacking the Saintess was a grave sin, but he still wanted to save his subordinate's life. This scandal, a knight attacking the Saintess, couldn't be allowed to spread. Elena specifically instructed Carterban to keep it quiet. Looking at the clothes that had been trampled underfoot, Elena apologized tearfully. "I'm so sorry I ruined your clothes." She had planned to come and go quietly, never expecting things to escalate like this. Seeing her remorse, a faint blush crept onto Carterban's face. He couldn't resist gently wiping away her tears. "It's just a piece of clothing. If it's ruined, it's ruined. There's no need to keep clothes that upset the Saintess." Noticing the marks on her neck, Carterban's heart clenched. He dropped to his knees again. "To think I allowed you to be injured. I am unworthy. Please punish me." Brushing aside such trivial matters, Elena asked if he was angry. "You told me to stay away from Prince Leon's palace before, but I didn't listen. Are you angry with me?" Carterban immediately denied it. He could never be angry with the Saintess. He was merely displeased with Prince Leon. The prince posed a threat to the Saintess. Receiving the answer she desired, Elena beamed. Carterban wondered when this change had occurred. The Saintess wasn't as quick to anger as she used to be. Carterban reassured her repeatedly that such an incident would never happen again. With the misunderstanding cleared, Elena wished this amicable atmosphere could last until the very end. How wonderful that would be. What is my punishment then? For the prayer meeting, the guard's actions, and this incident? The Saintess couldn't resist him. She leaned in close and whispered in his ear, "From now on, you'll do what I say." What did she want him to do? She wondered that herself. Carterban, consumed by guilt for failing to protect the Saintess, insisted on being punished. The penance Elena proposed left them both flushed. From now on, she declared, "I want sword lessons 3 times a week. Even if I start learning now," she reasoned, "I won't be as skilled as the knights. But just in case, when my divine powers disappear, I'll have some means of self-defense, so I can protect myself even after leaving the Grand Temple." And, she thought, a sly smile playing on her lips, "It's a chance to improve my relationship with Carterban. Even if he eventually sides with the real Saintess, I won't be so upset. Things won't end as tragically as they did for Elise." Carterban readily agreed to her request, and Elena returned to her room, a lightness in her step. After such a busy evening, she could finally get a good night's sleep. She looked forward to sleeping in tomorrow. She wriggled under the covers, changed into her nightgown, and settled in for a long, restful sleep. In the dead of night, her window suddenly flew open. Elena sat up groggily. A figure lurked by her bedside. Holy crap, on the 5th floor? Is this a person or a ghost? Although she hadn't met this red-haired man before, she recognized him from the novel. This was the 3rd male lead, Aslan, the king of the mages. Elena was astonished by his sudden appearance. "Didn't you receive a letter?" He finally understood who had sent the mysterious message. "What do you mean by the deal is done?" The red-haired man reached out. "Are you playing dumb with me? It's the deal where you become my woman, of course." A dangerous aura emanated from him, and all Elena wanted to do was run. The impatient Aslan scooped her into his arms. "I will make you bear my child." Elena finally understood who the beast the fake Saintess had spoken of was. She tried to struggle, but Aslan gave her no chance. "You can't refuse. This is our agreement, and you've already prepared yourself to accept me, haven't you? Otherwise, why would you have drunk the potion that negates my magic?" He flipped the Saintess over like a salted fish. "I can't wait any longer." She had transmigrated into the body of the fake Saintess, the one destined for the stake. She had intended to turn over a new leaf and find a way to escape the Grand Temple. But the fake Saintess had dug too many holes. If Elena wanted to keep this body, she had to accept its life, including the previously made contracts, like the one to have a child with the 3rd male lead. And so, under the cover of darkness, Aslan climbed through her window to collect on his promise. Although she had drunk the potion, his magic was too powerful. After one time, Elena couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to continue. After all, the contract stipulated he could until he felt the stirring of the child. But Elena had fainted, leaving the red-haired Aslan propped up on his elbow, sighing. "Why do I feel a little tired too? Did I not drink enough tea?" He gently wiped away Elena's tears, inwardly scoffing. Humans are truly fragile. The night was silent, and only Aslan was awake. Bored, he decided to find something to do. Since he had nothing better to occupy his time, he might as well remove the curse from the Saintess's thigh. This was another condition of the contract, to eliminate the curse that was slowly consuming her. That the Saintess of the Grand Temple could be afflicted by someone else's curse was surprising. He had assumed removing it would be a trivial matter. Unexpectedly, the world's greatest mage found himself struggling. Elena's fragile body couldn't withstand his magic. Elena was currently only slowly losing her divine power. But after that, the curse would consume her life force. This vicious curse would only end with the host's death. The honorable mage, true to the contract, placed a tender kiss on the Saintess's forehead, even if it was just for appearances. He had to help his woman resolve her troubles. The next day dawned bright and clear. Hilda, who had been confined, was discovered missing. "He has been stripped of his knighthood and expelled," Carterban announced calmly, turning to leave. The other knights assumed he was grieving Hilda's departure. Then they saw him grinning at a wooden training sword. Am I dreaming? I've never seen the commander smile like that. They were all baffled. Carterban had never felt the morning hours stretch on so long. He had agreed to meet the Saintess in his quarters that afternoon for their sword lesson, and he couldn't wait. Why isn't it time yet? The impatient Carterban decided to go a little early. Don't let Carterban catch me like this. Having transmigrated into the fake Saintess's body, Elena decided to learn some self-defense techniques so she could protect herself after leaving the Grand Temple. It was also a good opportunity to spend more time with Carterban and improve their relationship. And the commander himself was eagerly anticipating their meeting, even pondering on his way what techniques to teach her first. As for why the Saintess needed to learn self-defense, Carterban thought, shouldn't divine power be enough in times of danger? He shook his head, dismissing such superfluous thoughts. Whatever the Saintess said, he would simply obey. His good mood vanished the moment he saw the Crown Prince, Leon, loitering at the Saintess's door. What was that good-for-nothing, with his obvious designs on Elena, doing here? His brow furrowed, glaring at the Crown Prince. He was deeply annoyed by this fly constantly buzzing around Elena. "Your Highness, what business do you have here?" The tension between them crackled, thick with animosity. A nearby priest intervened, fearing a brawl. "Please, Commander Carterban." "Apologies," Carterban muttered, reining in his temper. There was no need to rise to the bait. His presence here was perfectly justified. He instructed the priest to inform the Saintess that he had arrived for their appointment. An appointment? Leon bristled. Was this man trying to usurp his position as Elena's intended? What sort of appointment did he have with the Saintess? But for now, no one could see Elena. At that moment, Carterban's attention shifted from the irksome prince. He sensed a magical aura emanating from the Saintess's chambers. Could she be in danger? He rushed to the door and hammered on it. "Saintess Elena, are you all right?" "It's Carterban." Light flickered. Elena opened her sleepy eyes. The red-haired man from last night was still there. Utterly bewildered, she couldn't recall what sort of deal the imposter Saintess had made with him. Feigned amnesia was her only recourse. The mage, completely taken aback by the heartbroken woman before him, floundered. After a moment of frantic thought, desperate to salvage his plans, he retrieved a contract from his spatial storage. "You say you've lost your memory? That makes things difficult, but we must honor our agreement. This is the letter you sent me. What are the specifics of this contract?" "A letter alone isn't enough for me to believe you," Elena countered. The red-haired man, Aslan, produced a stone tablet. This otherworldly artifact would eventually come into the possession of the future heroine as well. Elena, however, couldn't decipher the script. Aslan leaned in, translating for her. "I, Elena, Saintess of the Grand Temple, will become Aslan's woman and bear his child." Sensing her skepticism, Aslan reassured her, "You are already mine. I wouldn't lie to you. According to the agreement, you wished for 3 things from me. One of them is the mark on your leg." Aslan's explanation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Carterban, arriving for his appointment, caught them completely off guard. Elena, having transmigrated into the body of the lascivious impostor Saintess, had been determined to reform and avoid her destined demise. Who could have imagined that the impostor's machinations would lead her to ensnare 2 of the novel's male leads? And then there was Carterban, whose feelings had shifted due to her changed personality, now diligently arriving to teach her self-defense. Inside, the two discussing the contract were forced to pause by the insistent pounding. Panic seized Elena. She knew it was Carterban, here for their sword lesson. If he saw her like this, the situation would explode. Aslan, however, remained unfazed. With his power, he was confident he could handle anyone. Elena, desperate to conceal the scene, shoved Aslan aside and scrambled for a robe, wrapping herself hastily. She then attempted to cover the disheveled bed. Aslan scowled at her actions. He sat there, fuming, watching her frantic attempts at concealment, feeling like a mistress caught by the wife. He was the rightful partner, after all. Then it dawned on him, no amount of hiding would suffice if this man didn't leave. But he lacked the courage to order the powerful mage around. He could only tentatively suggest that Aslan get off the bed. Aslan not only refused, but he also refused to leave. Why should he hide? His pride wouldn't allow retreat. To assert his claim, he was prepared to let anyone witness their connection. Elena, terrified of this beast of a man, could only resort to gentle persuasion. Feigning illness wouldn't work here. She embraced him, softly explaining the precariousness of their situation, urging him to consider the implications for the Saintess if they were discovered by the Grand Temple. The words, "my man," melted Aslan's stubbornness. The powerful mage, now a smitten puppy whose position had been acknowledged, wagged his metaphorical tail and departed through the window. At that very moment, Carterban burst through the door, sword at the ready, followed closely by the equally anxious Crown Prince. Elena clutched her robe, standing by the bed. I was sleeping late," so I wanted to open the window for some fresh air. The flimsy excuse was unconvincing, even to her own ears, let alone to these two men. However, neither seemed inclined to press the matter. "My apologies," Leon said, feigning politeness. "I shouldn't have disturbed your rest." After confirming the appointment between Alina, the Saintess, and Carterban, Hilda prepared to leave, expressing her hope that Alina would find time to chat with her later. Alina agreed readily, so much so that she momentarily forgot to clutch her nightgown closed. Carterban glanced at the disheveled bed, but didn't pry. After confirming Alina was unharmed, he went to the reception room to wait. Alina was relieved that Carterban hadn't asked any questions. However, as he left, his expression was grim. Having transmigrated into the body of the fake Saintess in the novel, Alina was determined to maintain a good relationship with Carterban, the male lead, to avoid a fiery demise. This was the second time someone had been found in her room. It should be fine, she reassured herself. Carterban won't pry. Next up was her sword lesson with him. Gaining his favor would be a piece of cake, Alina thought. A little sword play, a few impressive swings, and he'd be applauding her natural talent. But reality proved harsher than her fantasy. Carterban had only prepared wooden swords, a humbling reminder of her naivete. Of course, a novice should start with wooden swords. Sensing Alina's disappointment, Carterban decided to let her hold his own sword, just to get a feel for it. He hadn't expected her to be unable to even lift it. If Carterban hadn't reacted quickly, his prized possession would have clattered to the floor. Alina hadn't realized a sword could be so heavy. Carterban explained that only such a heavy sword could withstand the might of magical beasts. Adding minerals or monster bones would make it lighter, but also significantly reduce its power. Alina was pleased to see him so talkative. The more they interacted, the faster their bond would grow. However, when he mentioned that he considered his sword as precious as his own life, Alina quickly apologized. After all, she had nearly dropped his lifeblood on the floor. Thankfully, he'd caught it. Otherwise, that offense would have been enough to bring her execution date forward. Carterban realized he'd actually handed his sword to someone else. He must have wanted to avoid disappointing her, he reasoned. Sword practice was exhausting. Just holding the stances had Alina sweating profusely, and her form was still incorrect. Carterban, unable to bear it any longer, resorted to hands-on instruction. So much for her fantasies of natural talent. She also noticed the unhealed injury on Carterban's wrist. He hadn't had it treated by the Divine Oracle. After mastering the 5 basic sword techniques, Alina healed Carterban's wrist as a gesture of gratitude. He was touched by the Saintess's personal treatment. Hearing her sincere desire to improve her strength, he realized that finding a suitable weapon would be faster than slow, tedious practice. He remembered that each Saintess traditionally carried a short sword forged from the claws of the magical beast, Kylie's. It was a powerful weapon capable of reflecting attacks back at the assailant. Alina recalled reading about the weapon in the novel. However, she had no idea where it was. Carterban told her to bring it to their next lesson. A woman needed a means of self-defense, especially when venturing outside. Determined to ensure her safety after leaving the temple, Alina resolved to learn some swordsmanship. She had started with confidence, but the training proved difficult. Carterban suggested she use the Saintess's short sword for their next practice. The suggestion sent a chill down Alina's spine. If Carterban discovered the sword was missing, wouldn't Leon be disappointed in the Saintess again? The short sword, traditionally kept by each Saintess, had already been pawned off by the fake Saintess. The man who received it was initially disappointed by its seemingly worthless appearance. However, upon noticing the jeweled decorations on the sword, he brightened considerably, praising the Saintess's generosity and planning to sell it. Alina could only weep inwardly. How could that wastrel give away a sacred treasure of the temple so carelessly? She couldn't tell Carterban the sword was gone. Even though she didn't know if it was still there, she had to go to Abbey Street, mentioned in the original novel, to look for it. She worked quickly to finish her tasks. The selection ceremony for the Grand Divine Oracle was only waiting for the arrival of Carl, the Divine Oracle. After informing the Divine Oracles that she would be praying in her room the next day and mustn't be disturbed, she prepared to leave. A secret passage in her room led near the temple exit. Alina, ready for her mission, set off to find the short sword. Venturing outside for the first time, she felt nervous. Observing the bustling crowds, she was relieved to remain unnoticed. Breathing the air of freedom, she even considered leaving for good, escaping the threat of being burned alive. Carterban's sudden appearance nearly made her jump out of her skin. Had he discovered her escape after only a single step? She couldn't even think of an excuse. Carterban, arriving behind him, was simply apprehending a thief. This fellow was attempting to pilfer items from the Grand Temple and was caught red-handed. He spotted a familiar figure in the crowd, but before he could intervene, his subordinates called him away. This provided Alina with the opportunity to slip away unnoticed. Silently departing, Alina felt Carterban's presence, but every word he spoke seemed to brand her further. This spinster, too, had given temple property to an outsider. Out in the unfamiliar streets, Alina inquired everywhere, but could find no trace of Abbey Street. Then, she overheard a conversation between two people nearby. One of them was the very person Alina had been desperately searching for, the former imposter Saintess's one-night stand. Alina discreetly followed her, finally arriving at the fabled Abbey Street. The debtor, penniless, tried to haggle for a higher price for the items she was selling, but the merchant heartlessly dismissed her. Seeing the short sword displayed on the stall, Alina's heart leaped with joy. She yearned to hold it in her hands. The cunning merchant, taking advantage of what he perceived as the young woman's naivete, smirked and demanded 50 copper coins. Crown Prince Leon, witnessing this injustice, roared his disapproval, simultaneously berating the merchant's greed and halting Alina's reach for her purse. After some haggling, the temple treasure was finally purchased for 5 silver coins. Alina was astonished. She hadn't expected the crown prince, who should have been accustomed to a life of luxury, to possess bargaining skills rivaling those of a market vendor. When Leon inquired why the Saintess was out alone, Alina's desire to flee intensified. This wasn't something she could explain. She was so distracted that she didn't even notice the rapidly approaching carriage. Leon reacted swiftly, pulling her back in his arms just in time. Shielding her from a splashing mud, the atmosphere between them grew charged. He then vowed to protect her, a promise that sent shivers down Alina's spine. She even entertained the notion that the crown prince's affections were genuine. She impulsively pulled him into a clothing store to buy matching outfits. "Just call me Leon," he offered. Leon seized the opportunity to build rapport, even throwing in a wink. In return, Alina allowed him to use her name. Considering her title was unique throughout the land, and to avoid revealing her true identity while outside the temple, she permitted him to call her Alina, a shortened version of her real name, emphasizing that it was her own name and not related to her role as Saintess. Having exchanged names, the two, like young lovers, decided to continue exploring the city together, completely forgetting about returning to the temple. They strolled along, enjoying each other's company and the sights and sounds of the bustling streets. Leon, a seasoned traveler due to his military campaigns, pointed out various landscapes depicted in a painting. Looking at the images, Lena was reminded of her past, when she would lie in bed, gazing at similar pictures and dreaming of seeing the world. Sensing her thoughts, Leon extended an invitation. "We should go see these places together sometime." His words struck a chord within her. However, as long as she remained the Saintess, such a dream would remain unattainable. Looking at the sincere crown prince, she almost confessed her true identity, wondering if he might help her escape. Remembering the inexplicable curse afflicting her, she abandoned the idea. The sun was beginning to set, as she needed to return to her duties. After bidding Lena farewell, Leon leaned against a tree, lost in thought. "The Saintess's real name is Elise, isn't it?" he mused. Just a few days prior, he had received news that the true Saintess had appeared in a small village. When the villagers were attacked by a monster, she had stepped forward and healed them. But there could only be one Saintess. If the woman in the village was the true Saintess, then the one in the temple was an imposter. He just needed to find the village Saintess and confirm her authenticity to expose the fraud within the Grand Temple. Meanwhile, back at the temple, Lena, oblivious to the events unfolding outside, was still reveling in the joy of retrieving the short sword. She readily agreed to Carterban's request to leave the temple, hoping he would bring Carl, the high priest's successor, back safely. As Carterban departed, he noticed something familiar about the cloak Carl was holding. His suspicion that the Saintess had snuck out the previous night grew stronger, and he decided to double back and question Carl about it. He then encountered the Crown Prince, who affectionately called the Saintess Lena. Witnessing their closeness, Carterban's world crumbled. Scowling, he surmised that the Crown Prince hadn't been present the previous night either. Could they have been out together? The Saintess going out on a date with a man? And to be discovered by him, the captain of the Holy Guard. Carterban was about to confront the Saintess directly when he stumbled upon them again, chatting happily. Seeing the aura of romance surrounding them, his face darkened. However, as captain, his duties were numerous. He needed to visit Carl, who had returned to inherit the position of high priest. This sickly man was the former imposter Saintess's nightmare. Even hearing his name made her shudder. To others, he maintained an image of gentle kindness. He earned the respect of everyone except the Saintess. He knew full well she loathed him. He still tried to pry information about her from Carterban. But Carterban, eager to return, only checked on the priest's well-being before hurrying back to the temple. Meanwhile, back at the temple, Prince Leon regaled Alina with tales of mosquito repellents from across the empire, promising to be her personal escort if she ever traveled. This turned Alina's anticipation and joy into a knot of anxiety. She was merely inhabiting Alina's body. If the real Alina were to appear, Leon would surely fall for her instead. Leon, sensing her discomfort, smoothly changed the subject, mentioning the upcoming high priest election. At the mention of the high priest, a sharp pain shot through Alina. She waved away the prince's offer of assistance and asked him to leave. Consumed by a burning desire, Alina longed to embrace Leon, hoping he could cool her down. Fighting the heat, she tried to retreat to her room, but Carterban appeared at the door. "No, don't come in," she cried, her voice echoing the Saintess's usual tone. How could Carterban, ever vigilant, ignore such a plea? The moment the door opened, Alina, unable to resist any longer, leaned against him. "You can't do this," she murmured. Fortunately, the man retained a shred of reason. However, even a stalwart man was easily pushed down by the woman. Seeing his continued resistance, Alina, tears welling in her eyes, whispered, "Do you hate me that much?" Just as Carterban's defenses began to crumble, Alina, her rationality returning, abruptly ceased her advances and retreated to her bedroom. Seeing Aslan, the red-haired mage, at the window, she felt a surge of relief. Aslan's gaze, soft as water, met hers. Seeing his beloved waiting for him warmed his heart. But catching the scent of another man clinging to her, he snapped, nipping her neck. "My little treasure, has someone else touched you?" Alina, initially frightened, found herself strangely enjoying the sensation. Finally, weakened by the overwhelming feeling, she drifted into unconsciousness. Aslan then remembered his primary purpose, to deliver a ring. He had heard the Saintess loved jewels and hoped to win her favor. Stroking the mark on her leg, wishing he could quickly resolve this troublesome situation, he realized the mark was connected to the source of her desire. It dawned on him that the Saintess hadn't been acting of her own free will, but was under the influence of dark magic. Sitting heavily on the bed, convincing himself he could still claim her, he sensed the lingering presence of his rival, the man whose scent clung to his beloved. Meanwhile, Carterban, back in his own room, couldn't find peace. His thoughts were consumed by the Saintess. Even as he entered the secret passage, his heart remained in turmoil. Sensing powerful magic emanating from the Saintess's chambers, his protective instincts surged. The continent's most powerful mage and its strongest holy knight clashed for the first time, evenly matched. However, Aslan, confident in his perceived position as her rightful partner, held a clear advantage in spirit. Holding Alina close, he declared his ownership. "You are but a temple hound. How dare you lay claim to your master's lips?" He dared to try and take the Saintess right before his eyes. Seeing Alina being touched, Carterban lost all restraint and lunged forward, sword drawn. Their epic battle, however, was abruptly halted by the woman's cry. She found herself in a dreamscape, searching for the memories Alina had hidden. Young Alina was kind and sweet, inseparable from Carl, the high priest. She yearned to use her power to help others. Following Carl's teachings, she dispersed her power. Weakened, she had repeatedly attempted suicide but always failed. Enraged, Alina stopped him from delving further, grabbing his hair and demanding, "Who gave you permission to pry into my memories? I shouldn't have brought you here." she hissed, shoving him out of the dream. Waking with a jolt, Elena wished she could faint again. Waking up to two men looming over her was enough to shock anyone. Elena had been pulled into the book by the false Saintess to serve as a stand-in. She had intended to diligently play her part and live a peaceful life. Instead, she inherited a body marked by debauchery. In her dream, she witnessed Elena's childhood memories. The once kind-hearted Elena had been cursed with insatiable desire, unable to even end her own suffering. Now, the high priest Karl, whose mere name once sent shivers down her spine, had returned. This time, however, she wasn't alone. She awoke to two men at her bedside, who wouldn't faint from such overwhelming bliss. Looking at the two men, capable of tearing down the roof again, Elena could only pray for mercy. Aslan wanted her to confess her love for him, to reassure him and spite Carterban. He claimed their intimacy was merely a result of the curse. Hearing that it wasn't consensual, Carterban felt a pang of hurt. The realization that it wasn't love dealt him a blow. To prevent this seemingly fragile man, Aslan, from stealing his woman, Elena, the red-haired mage clung to her possessively. With eyes full of suspicion, he revealed the curse of the Saintess. If you don't resolve this problem, your master will be perpetually controlled by desire and lose her divinity. He summoned me here for this very reason. Was last night truly an accident? Carterban wondered. Could the mage's words be true? He didn't want to blindly believe Aslan's one-sided account. He wanted to hear Elena's confession. Seeing her hesitant expression, Aslan continued to fan the flames. You, the captain of the Holy Guard, can't even perceive your master's abnormal state, nor did you notice an enemy's intrusion. Are you so useless that you should even remain? Carterban found a disturbing logic in Aslan's words. Was he truly useless? But Aslan was equally dangerous. He wasn't even human. As the two men stood poised for a fight, Elena felt as though her hair would be ripped out by the roots from her own anxiety. The arrival of a third man offered a welcome reprieve. If you two keep fighting, I'll call Leon for help, Elena declared. Leon, startled by the scene of two men vying for one woman, rushed to her side, demanding to know what was happening. With the intervention of this third party, the conflict momentarily subsided. The three men retreated, leaving Elena to ponder the situation. Could all three of them truly be interested in her? Elena shook her head, trying to dispel such unrealistic thoughts. She reminded herself firmly that they were all drawn to the novel's heroine, not her. She couldn't forget her role as the false Saintess. Finally, the day of the high priest election arrived. Even the officials who usually sought backdoor deals readily yielded their positions to the returning Karl. These individuals, clinging to power, unanimously nominated Karl for the position of high priest. The fervor with which they welcomed him was almost frenzied. A deep, visceral fear gripped Elena. She wanted to flee. Saintess, are you all right? Carterban's arrival was a steadying presence. Don't worry, we're all here with you. Karl was taken aback by Elena's composed greeting. Seeing the crown prince at her side, he felt a prickle of resentment, like an outsider intruding on his territory. During the high priest selection ceremony, Elena expected some opposition to Karl's candidacy. However, it was a complete landslide. Not a single voice dissented against Karl's appointment. Watching Karl's smug, triumphant smile and the veiled threat in his eyes, a wave of terror washed over Elena. Karl, intending to use his newfound power to frighten Elena away, found his intimidation directed primarily at Carterban. I'll repay you soon, he hissed. What did he mean by like in the past? Carterban sensed Elena's distress. If you don't want him to become high priest, he offered, let me stop him. Unsure of his methods, Elena could only agree. To her surprise, Carterban immediately removed his weapons. I beseech the Saintess to dismiss me, for I am incompetent, he declared. Not long ago, a malevolent entity infiltrated the temple, and I failed to prevent it. I am no longer worthy of my duty as protector. How could something breach the temple's defenses? The priests were more inclined to blame the Saintess for demoralizing the captain. At that moment, a surge of powerful magic emanated from outside, compelling them to believe Carterban's claim. Outside the Grand Temple, Aslan stood alone on the rooftop, his gaze fixed on the divine power radiating from the temple. The sight displeased him. It should be torn down, he muttered. Aslan had stumbled into this world through a dimensional rift. However, tearing open space-time to return required more power than he possessed alone. He needed the help of his fellow werewolves. He'd considered finding a powerful female to bear his offspring. He'd initially believed the Saintess, who supposedly had the power to mend a rift, to be his enemy. He hadn't anticipated her seeking him out for assistance. He had transmigrated into the body of the Saintess from the novel, becoming a scapegoat. Beset by internal and external threats, Alina desperately sought to avoid being burned at the stake. The mere mention of Carl's name sent shivers down her spine. However, this time, all three male leads from the novel were on her side. To prevent the sinister Carl from becoming high priest and continuing to control the Saintess, they were willing to take drastic measures. Carter Ban went so far as to offer his resignation during the council meeting. Aslan, too, unleashed his magic outside the temple, a display of power meant to intimidate the priests. The timid priests, after a brief deliberation, decided on a strategic retreat. Fleeing seemed the most prudent course of action. Both the high priest election and Carter Ban's dismissal were temporarily shelved. Saintess, let's hide somewhere safe, Carter Ban urged. His sole concern was Alina's well-being. Please, don't resign, she pleaded. She didn't want him to sacrifice his position for her. Seeing her concern, Carter Ban's expression softened. How could he abandon the Saintess who cared so deeply for him? Stay away from her. The sight of Carter Ban's familiarity with Alina ignited a jealous fire within Aslan. He burst through the window, seizing Alina in a possessive embrace. Even Alina urged Carter Ban to leave, granting the two of them a moment alone. After Carter Ban obediently left, Aslan looked up and teased, "You've trained him well. He's a truly obedient dog." He stroked the red fur of the creature rubbing against him, thinking, this is what a big dog should be like. You just helped me a great deal. Thanks to you, the meeting was adjourned. But what did you do that used up so much magic? Just tracking where your runaway Saintess went. Aslan revealed a rare moment of vulnerability, his head resting on Alina's leg, reluctant to lift it. She'll probably leave once she finds the real Saintess. Alina had little confidence in her own charm. Sensing Alina's hand suddenly stop and her mood darken, Aslan reluctantly raised his head. He, too, enjoyed head pats and wanted to do something to cheer her up. But Alina could only appreciate the sentiment. After all, they were in the meeting room. Aslan, do you like my body? She assumed Aslan only desired her body, not the soul within. Fearing the demonic beast, like a demon, might want to devour the soul of its contractor, she immediately told him, "You can't have my soul." Her mind raced, calculating. If she used Alina's body for the contract, she'd gain a powerful servant for free. Aslan poked a finger against her chest, indicating that her heart was all he desired. "You are my woman, after all." After a moment of intimacy, Aslan requested only a smile as repayment and temporarily departed. Elsewhere, two shrewd individuals were engaged in a clandestine negotiation. Prince Leon, a keen judge of character, knew upon first glance that Carl was full of malicious intent. With a superficial smile, he flattered Carl, saying he was certainly high priest material. He also openly confessed his admiration for the Saintess, offering his usefulness as leverage. In return, he asked Carl to promise, once he became high priest, to expel Carter Ban. Within this quartet, he alone possessed true cunning. He was confident that with his clever mind, he could win Alina's heart. With Aslan's departure, the influence of his magic began to fade. Receiving help from the three men, Alina even hoped they could all get along. Get rid of that thought. Her heart wrestled with itself again, but the fear of Carl's confinement quickly quelled the conflict. Until we understand this terrifying magic, no one can see the Saintess alone. Dutiful Carter Ban immediately rejected Carl's request, so Alina decided to meet Carl in the main hall, where there would be many people. With Carter Ban present, she believed Carl wouldn't dare do anything inappropriate. However, what the two of them encountered was Leon's arrival. This was precisely Carl's scheme. He wanted to manipulate the Saintess and the prince into doing something that would allow him to control them both more effectively. Alina was once again caught in a dilemma, torn between acceptance and refusal. But this time, it was in front of two of the men vying for her. "Don't come any closer." Since the Saintess forbade him to touch her, the prince chose to take his frustration out on Carter Ban. He raised his fist, about to strike the negligent guard. To prevent further conflict, Alina revealed the curse mark on her body. The Saintess, losing control once more, was startled by footsteps outside the door. Immediately realizing this was Carl's trap, she smashed a nearby vase, intending to self-harm. She tried to gouge out the mark with a shard of glass. With all his strength, the prince restrained her. "What are you doing?" Carterban watched anxiously as the prince held Alina in a princess carry. A sharp, "Unless you want to do it," kept him rooted to the spot. Leon, in his princely authority, commanded Carterban to close his eyes, cover his ears, and turn around. He had transmigrated into the Saintess's body to save his life, but now he was living a complicated life entangled with these four men. Inside the room, the two worked to alleviate the symptoms of the curse. Beside them, a loyal guard stood watch. Though reluctant, Carterban endured, all for the sake of the Saintess. Having gotten what he wanted, the prince's mood was no better than the guard standing outside the door. What should have been a joyous occasion felt hollow and depressing, knowing it wasn't consensual. "Is the Saintess inside?" Carl, having set his trap, made his timely appearance, even bringing a group of people to witness the spectacle. Hearing compromising sounds from within, everyone assumed the Saintess was enjoying some private time. Feigning ignorance, Carl reached for the door, a triumphant smirk stretching to his ears. No matter who was inside, the Saintess would be ostracized, leaving her with no one to rely on but him. To his surprise, he was met not with the Saintess, but with a displeased Prince Leon. "What is the meaning of this? You summoned me here only to stand me up?" Carl, noticing the marks on Leon's clothing, was certain something had transpired between him and the Saintess, but he was puzzled by the lack of anyone else in the room. Leon, facing the priests alone, remained unfazed. He questioned Carl aggressively, demanding to know why he had brought so many people. Though nervous, Carl's primary concern was still the Saintess's whereabouts. "The prince is here with his clothes disheveled. Surely you haven't done something inappropriate?" Leon clapped Carl on the shoulder with a familiar air, explaining that he'd simply been lost in thought about the Saintess, and with the increasing heat, what was wrong with unbuttoning his shirt. Thus, he smoothly extricated himself from the situation. Alina, who should have been at the reception, was currently in Carterban's arms. Thinking they had been discovered by the others, her eyes welled with tears. Glancing at Aslan's dagger, she considered fleeing. In that moment, she finally understood how Alina felt. Just a soul in a foreign body, unable to act freely. Struggling to leave the captain's embrace, she cried, "You don't have to protect a Saintess like me. If you hate me, you can reject me." Looking at the self-deprecating Saintess, Carterban's eyes filled with tenderness. Gently settling the bristling, kitten-like Alina onto the bed, he bowed with a formal chivalry, finally resolving to confess. "I only hope that you truly want me and aren't being controlled. Long ago, my feelings for you surpassed the boundaries of duty. I harbor feelings for you that I shouldn't," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Alina cupped his face and softly kissed him. This time it wasn't because of a curse, but from the heart. "I'll get you some clothes," Carterban murmured, the picture of pure-hearted chivalry, not one to take advantage of a vulnerable moment. After all, they still had to return to the others. The long-awaited moment had finally arrived. Carterban could now hold Alina's hand, leading her back the way they came. "So you knew about this secret passage too?" Alina realized belatedly. She'd previously fallen asleep in the garden, but woken up inside. It turned out Carterban, her own personal fairy godmother, was responsible. The young woman before him smiled, charming and lovely. Carterban, emboldened, asked if he could call her by her name. "Call me Alina," she replied, deciding to treat all the men equally. The sweet scent of their burgeoning romance began to fill the air. Inside, Aslan's jealousy practically radiated through the door, putting Carterban on alert. Alina urged Carterban to leave first. The bristling mage inside needed soothing. "Our captain isn't the type to monopolize a beauty," Carterban assured her. "Protecting the Saintess's safety is enough for him." After a reluctant farewell, Alina was left alone. She now faced Aslan, whose jealousy had reached a boiling point. "I've been putting up with that guy for a long time," he grumbled, pulling Alina into a tight embrace. Despite his fierce appearance, he was easily appeased with a little affection. "You hate Carterban so much, yet you still let him go so obediently," Alina teased. "I heard you helped me at the reception." "Thank you." Hearing her gratitude for the first time, Aslan blushed, the color rivaling his hair. "I just sensed a hostile presence and went to check. I didn't want you to run into them unexpectedly. If you thank me, I'd do anything for you." "It's a blessing to have the help of a great mage," Elena replied. I heard they all call you Aslan, so I will too. After all, we should all be on the same page. The forward Aslan took on the duty of guarding Elena for the night. This was the first gathering of the four, and despite the awkwardness, Elena couldn't bring herself to tell them about her soul's transmigration. She could only claim to have lost most of her memories, unsure of the curse's origin, suspecting it was related to Karl the High Priest. She hoped for the three men's help, lest she meet an untimely end. Leon suggested a quick solution, only to be met with Aslan's scorn. Do you think I, a mage, am useless? If it were that simple, I would have done it already. This mark devours holiness and makes me lose control. Elena's words fueled the three men's anger, uniting them against a common enemy. Their first objective, strip Karl of his authority as High Priest. Meanwhile, Karl continued to cultivate an image of loyalty and responsibility. Whether it was the position of High Priest or the Saintess herself, he claimed to be acting in everyone's best interest. However, some were aware of Karl's true nature. He still vividly remembered the humiliation he suffered at the Saintess's hands. Karl didn't care about their negative attitudes. The Grand Temple was firmly within his grasp. A universally beloved priest wasn't necessarily a good person. He'd carefully crafted a kind and approachable persona, and the position of High Priest was his ultimate goal. But the Saintess, with her new soul, had to fight for her life. She had to stop Karl's scheme with the help of her men. One moment, he was dreaming of becoming High Priest. The next, his world came crashing down. Carterban and his men raided Karl's room, uncovering a strange box. From within, they pulled a monstrous creature. Karl stared in horror, stammering denials, as the monster acted affectionately towards him, as if recognizing its master. Carterban swiftly dispatched the creature. Elena seized the opportunity to purify the remaining dark magic. They worked together seamlessly. Picking up the shattered remnants of the box, Elena recognized the wood as a type that could block magic. He even produced the Jirbao Shin accusation letter he'd received. The letter stated that Karl had been training demonic beasts since his time at the border. Faced with so much physical evidence, Karl was speechless. I will use all my power to prove your innocence, Elena reassured him, urging him to trust her and wait a little longer. In truth, this trap had been set by the Saintess herself. She wanted to publicly discredit Karl. If he was connected to demonic beasts, his career in the Grand Temple would be over. Having achieved her goal, Elena happily approached the red-haired Aslan. It's all thanks to your magic, she exclaimed. Can you teach me? If she could learn magic, she could protect herself if she ever left the sanctuary of the temple. But the Saintess was destined never to learn magic. Divine power and magic were incompatible. The only demonic beast who could touch the Saintess was Aslan and any future children they might have. Elena thought about her divine power, which was soon to disappear. It's not like there won't be opportunities to learn magic later, she mused. Aslan, with his sharp senses, picked up on her unusual demeanor. With me by your side, what need do you have for magic? Speaking to me is the same as possessing divine power. You're so interested in magic. Are you hiding something from me? Elena could only say that she wanted to rely on herself in the future and that she envied Aslan's ability to fly around with magic. She couldn't very well tell him that, according to the original story, she would lose her divine power and plan to leave on her own. Is that so? Aslan accepted her excuse and immediately swept her into the air, offering her a different perspective of the world. Fulfilling this small request was nothing to him. He'd already imagined how she would apologize. He hadn't expected her to burst into tears. It was hard to imagine how overwhelming this view must be for someone who had previously never left her sickbed. I really envy you, being so free, seeing this kind of scenery every day, she sobbed. Seeing her tears, Aslan was momentarily flustered, but quickly regained his composure. As long as I'm here, I can fulfill any of your wishes. You two can fly around freely. Meanwhile, Prince Leon's father was urging him to return home, claiming his mother missed him. Even a fool could see through that lie. His mother's grateful words were still fresh in his mind. Thanks to you, the Emperor is no longer obsessed with me. His attention is all on you. He burned the letter and went out for a change of scenery, happening upon Carterban admiring the sunset. He cheerfully went up to greet him. The two men watched the sunset together, but neither felt any joy. The woman they both loved was flying freely in the sky, with another man. Even the king of mages was striving to win Elena's heart. What reason did he, a prince, have to slack off? Lost in thought, he suddenly lashed out, and Carterban suffered an unexpected blow. After landing the punch, the prince added, "Elena asked me to do this," effectively extinguishing any desire Carterban might have had to retaliate. It's not just 3 women who can create a drama. 3 men vying for a woman's favor can also put on quite a show. But only one could hold Elena and fly in the sky. The other 2 could only watch from the ground and have a fight, apparently. Why fight? Can't they all just get along? Elena cradled Carterban's face, her eyes full of concern. "This was all a show for Carl," she explained. "Besides, I'm injured too." Leon, nursing his injured hand, muttered, "I'm so jealous you get to be healed by Elena. But we need to save this trophy for Carl to see." "Wow, Carterban, you're so tough," Elena exclaimed in admiration. "You can injure someone just by deflecting their attack." Hearing her praise, Carterban's face seemed to stop hurting. They could take him out and let Carl witness the evidence of their discord. Once they were alone in the room, Leon asked about Priest Eric. Elena claimed not to know him, but tears streamed down her face. "I really don't remember this person. Who is he?" Leon gently wiped away her tears. "Maybe he was someone important to you. He was Carl's assistant, but unlike the others, he always avoided Carl. I intend to find out what's behind all this." Carterban also set his sights on Eric. He stopped Eric as he stormed out of Carl's room. Clearly, their conversation during his meal delivery hadn't gone well. Elena woke up to a nightmare. At the crucial moment of Carl's downfall, her divine power vanished. She worried that her agreements with the 3 men would crumble. When it rains, it pours. Just after her divine power disappeared, she received news of a new Saintess and a demonic beast appearing in Terry Village. At the round table meeting with the Grand Temple officials, Elena was filled with anxiety. Even Carterban deliberately avoided her gaze. She couldn't allow the temple knights to go and support the new Saintess. She rose in opposition. After the meeting, once she'd calmed down, she realized that her actions were just like the old Elena. Carterban would leave her. "Elena," Aslan said, his voice laced with concern, "I know where your divine power has gone. I'll personally retrieve it for you." He glanced at Leon, hoping the news would bolster his friend's spirits. "Don't go, Aslan," Elena pleaded. "If you leave, it will be difficult for us to be together like this." Leon, consumed by his own anxieties, worried that everyone would abandon him. Aslan, ever perceptive, noticed his friend's distress. "Although I should stay with you while you're uneasy," Aslan reassured her, "I must investigate this. The knights here will protect you." Meanwhile, Leon penned a letter home. His father, in a desperate attempt to force his son's return, had declared war on a neighboring kingdom. If Leon didn't return soon, the conflict threatened to engulf the Grand Temple. He placed his trust in Carterban, hoping the knight would fulfill his duties during his 4-day absence. However, Carterban, preoccupied with his own investigation, had vanished, leaving his deputy in charge. Upon hearing the news of a new Saintess appearing, the opportunistic Carl erupted in excitement. "Summon the priests," he cried. "I confess, I must be punished." He had cursed Elena, attempting to steal her divine power. Years of scheming had yielded only a fleeting 3-second taste of victory. Now, with a new Saintess emerging, a second chance presented itself. Confessed criminals were sent to the underground prison to await execution. Carterban had specifically instructed his subordinates to prevent Carl from communicating with anyone. "Carterban," one of them challenged, "you know Elena has lost her divine power? She's no longer the Saintess. Will you, the loyal knight commander, still protect her?" The question did nothing to alter Carterban's resolve. In the prison, he encountered Cider, the knight who had threatened Elena, now awaiting transfer to the Anchi chambers. Meanwhile, Elena, seeking to maintain appearances and soothe public unrest, decided to perform charitable work at the Anchi chambers. To conceal her loss of power, she went without an escort. By a twist of fate, the 2 adversaries crossed paths. "I heard from Priest Carl that you slandered him," Cider snarled. "I'll set things right. The true Saintess will return soon." Elena, with only one defensive spell at her disposal, fought back. Just as she was about to be overwhelmed, Carterban, true to his word, intervened, shielding her from the attack. "Commander, come to your senses," Cider urged. "Kill the false Saintess, and you can welcome the true Saintess with Priest Carl." In Carterban's eyes, anyone who dared harm Alina deserved only death. He turned and embraced Alina, relieved to have arrived in time. But the darkening bruise around her wound revealed the dagger had been poisoned. Powerless, Alina prepared to summon the priest for healing. Carterban stopped her, urging her to return as if nothing had happened and meet him later that night. Back in her room, Alina paced anxiously. She no longer even possessed the ability to use the secret passages. After an agonizing wait, she finally saw the man she longed for, relief washing over her as she realized he was alive. "I'm no longer the Saintess," she whispered. "Why do you still protect me?" Carterban knelt, his voice soft and comforting. "That's all the more reason to stay by your side. From the moment you allowed me to call you by your name, you became more than just the Saintess. You became Alina, the one I am sworn to protect." The feeling of being chosen warmed her heart. She leaned in, offering a kiss to the knight who was now hers. "Alina," Carterban murmured, "I might not be able to stop this time." Lost in the moment, their surroundings faded away. "Carterban," Alina asked, voicing a long-held question, "why were you avoiding me? If it's something you've forgotten, Alina, let it be." Carterban chose to keep the truth about Eric, the priest, and his affections for both Alina and Carl, buried within his heart. Under the cover of darkness, the two prepared to leave, only to be discovered by Eric. He had found Cider's body and the poisoned dagger. He had come specifically to tend to Carterban's wound. Alina couldn't understand the strange look in his eyes, nor why he was weeping and apologizing. Suppressing her unease, she wanted only to escape. "You should leave the Grand Temple too," she urged. Just then, the other priest arrived. Eric, consumed by grief over the loss of his love, had no time to dwell on his emotions. "The Saintess once told me she wanted to leave the temple," he confessed, "but I was blind to Carl's true nature. Now, she's told me to escape, to survive." But this time, he was willing to risk everything to protect the Saintess. Suddenly, Eric's voice rang out. "I've seen her, the false Saintess. Follow me."